When you bleed, what is the color of the fluid you can see? I guess it should be red. That is because of the red blood cells. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the red blood cells. Now, the red blood cell is often referred to as the erythrocytes. Now, going into the red blood cell, we're going to be looking at these types of cell on three distinct bases. Firstly, their morphology. Secondly, the molecules associated with the cell. And thirdly, their functions. Okay? Now, looking at the morphology of the red blood cell. The red blood cell is actually biconcave in nature. Okay? That means it has depressions at both ends. Okay? So, looking at it laterally, it has this type of shape. This is what it looks like looking at it from the side. Okay, now looking at it anteriorly, it has this shape. Now this place is the depression. This is the depression. Now this depression occurs in both sides, so both in this side and at the back. So just assume that the red blood cell is like a coin. Now this coin has two sides, right? The face and the tail. So the face has a depression that pushes inside, and the tail also has a depression that pushes inside. That gives it a biconcave shape. That means it is concave at two parts. That is why it is called bi. Okay, so that is the first feature of the red blood cell. The biconcave nature of the red blood cell gives it some benefits. Firstly, it makes it small, because we know that the red blood cell has to go through some tiny blood vessels like the capillaries. Okay, so this particular shape gives it the ability to be small and gives it the ability to enter into smaller blood vessels. Okay, now that is one. Now it also helps to increase the surface area with respect to the volume. Okay, so just imagine a cell that is round. Okay, and before a molecule will move from this part to maybe this other part where it is needed, it will take a lot of time. But for the red blood cell, because it is biconcave in nature and it has a depression, the surface area is large, and the volume of distance between where the molecule will get to the cytoplasm is very short for the red blood cell. So these are the benefits of being biconcave in nature. Okay, now where the molecule will get to the cytoplasm is very short for the red blood cell. So these are the benefits of being biconcave in nature. Okay, now another type or another feature of the red blood cell is that it is about 7.2 and 2.4 in diameter and thickness, respectively. So in diameter, it's about around 7.2 micrometers. Okay, so about 7.2 to 2.4 micrometer in diameter and thickness. Okay, that is the second feature of the red blood cell. Now, another thing you need to know about the red blood cell is that this is very important. It is non-nucleated. That means it doesn't have a nucleus. This is the idea used by medical laboratory scientists to find out if there is Plasmodium parasite in the red blood cell. Okay, so that's by staining. So when they stain the red blood cell, if you find a dot that looks like a nucleus, that means it could be the Plasmodium parasite, because the red blood cell actually does not have a nucleus. It doesn't have a nucleus. That is why most times it is also referred to as the irregular cell, because it lacks the nucleus. Okay, so that's that. Now, another thing you should know about the red blood cell is that it has an average life cycle of about 120 days, and this is approximately 4 months. About 120 days and approximately 4 months. So after 120 days, the red blood cell dies and another one regenerates. Okay, so that is that. Now, the last thing you should know about the red blood cell is that it is actually made from a type of molecule or cell called the reticulocyte. Reticulocytes. Okay, so that is that about the morphology of the red blood cell. Now, for the molecules associated with the red blood cells, now we have different molecules associated with the red blood cell. Now, the most important of them is the hemoglobin. The hemoglobin is the most important molecule associated with the red blood cell. We also have other molecules like the spectrin, the protein 4.1 and 4.2. We also have the glycophorin A and C. Yeah. So we have a lot of them. These are molecules associated with the red blood cell. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about the hemoglobin, because this is the most important of them all. Now, looking at the hemoglobin now, the hemoglobin is made up of 4 protein molecules called the globin. And they are 4 in number: the alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, and beta 2. Okay, now each of these globin molecules, contain a red pigment called the heme. Okay, now each of these red pigment, that's the heme, contains 1 ion of iron. Okay, so each of these pigments contain 1 ion of iron. That means that one heme can actually bind a molecule of oxygen. Okay, so if you have 1 heme here, 1 heme here, 1 heme here, and 1 heme here, that means this globin can bond 4 molecules of oxygen. So what we are saying in essence is that the hemoglobin can actually bind 4 molecules of oxygen. So one hemoglobin can bind 4 molecules of oxygen. It's as simple as that. So the hemoglobin is made up of 4 globins: alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, and beta 2. Now, each of these globins contain a red pigment. That red pigment is known as the heme. Now, each of the red pigment contains 1 ion of iron. We know that the ion will bind the oxygen molecule. So that is what the hemoglobin is all about. As simple as this. Okay, so that means that one hemoglobin can actually bind 4 molecules of oxygen. So it is scientifically proven that one red blood cell one red blood cell contains about 300 million hemoglobin. Okay, so if one red blood cell will contain 300 million hemoglobin, do the maths, we would have about 1.2 billion oxygen molecules that are being carried by a single red blood cell. So if you multiply 300 million times 4, which are the globins, the hemes now, the red pigments, if you multiply this by 4, it's going to give you 1.2 billion. So one red blood cell carries about 1.2 billion oxygen molecule. That is massive. Okay, looking at the functions of the red blood cell, the red blood cell has one major function, and it's pretty simple: gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange. And these gases involved here are oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, so that's the major function of the red blood cell. It helps in gaseous exchange, and I will explain how this happens. Now, when we take in air, when we breathe in, the air gets into our trachea and branches into the bronchus and into the bronchiolus and gets to the alveoli. Now, in the alveoli, the alveoli is also referred to as air sac or alveoli. Now, in the alveoli, we have branch blood vessels. The lining of the alveoli is coated by blood vessels, capillaries. So when oxygen gets into this part of the lungs, which is the alveoli, what happens is that the red blood cells in the capillaries begins to bind the oxygen molecules. I hope you get that. You breathe in, it gets to the alveoli. The oxygen now gets to the alveoli. The red blood cells that are in the vessels, the capillaries, these blood vessels, begins to bind with the oxygen molecule by means of diffusion. When it binds the oxygen molecule, the next one binds, the next one binds. So all the red blood cells in this blood vessel binds with the oxygen molecule, and it begins to move to other parts of the body. All right. Now, one striking thing that happened here is that when once the red blood cell binds and moves to other parts of the body, the hemoglobin begins to lose its affinity. The combination of hemoglobin and oxygen begins to lose its affinity as it moves towards the tissues. So when the red blood cell gets towards the tissue, the oxygen molecule that is binded by the heme begins to detach into the tissues. When it detaches into the tissues, the red blood cell goes back again to the capillary to pick another oxygen molecule. So that's what happens. That's just the function of all the red blood cells in our body. It goes, it binds the oxygen molecule, it picks it to the tissue and drops it there. Now it is in the tissue now that the oxygen is being used for cellular respiration. So cellular respiration. So that's just the mechanism. It goes to the alveoli, it picks the oxygen that is being inhaled and takes it to other part of the body, tissues. Now when it gets to the tissue, it begins to unbind. It unbinds, dropping the oxygen for cellular respiration, and goes back to pick another. So that is how the red blood cell acts. That is the function of the red blood cell until 120 days until 120 days, and it disintegrates, and a new one is being made from the reticulocytes. Okay, so that is just that about the red blood cell. Now in my next video, I'll be talking about the white blood cell, the function of the white blood cells. We have different types of white blood cells. We are going to be looking at all these types of white blood cells, how you can know them when you see them, and the functions they perform. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this video, and if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, please do so. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.